Local broadcasts of KΑKOU are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo. And by Young Brothers, providing quality service you can count on, connecting our island communities for over 120 years as the state's leading inter-island freight transportation company. This fall, Hawaii voters will be casting their ballot for dozens of contests, including the historic race for president. Traditionally, voter turnout in Hawaii has been lukewarm, but can a new batch of Gen Z voters turning 18 energize the general election? We'll hear from first-time voters on why they're voting, what they want in a candidate, and the issues that are most pressing to them. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of KAKOU, Hawaii's Town Hall, start now.
Aloha and welcome to KΑKOU, Hawaii's Town Hall, live from the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Multimedia Studio. I'm Yunji Denise. On August 10th, Hawaii held its primary election. With few competitive races, the turnout was the lowest percentage in our state history. Voting here could arguably not be any easier. Most of the state does so by mail, and yet just a third of registered voters bothered to participate. November's election could be another story. With a presidential race on the ticket, engagement is expected to increase substantially. One of the key voting blocs is young people, and that's who we are speaking with tonight. This year, Gen Z young people born in the late 90s to early 2000s will make up more than 40 million potential voters. That's nearly a fifth of the American electorate. Now that includes 8 million youth who have reached voting age since 2022. But to have an impact, they have to actually vote. About 30% of Hawaii residents 18 to 24 voted in 2022, compared to 60% of voters 65 or older. So it's no wonder that politicians tend to focus on the demographic that turns out nearly twice as many votes. Do you remember the first time that you voted? Participating in democracy can be exciting and impactful on individuals and on community. KAKOU means all of us, as in we are all in this together. And when you consider just how close this election could be, how first-time voters are thinking really does affect us all. We want to hear from you in our discussion tonight. You can email or call in your questions. We're also streaming live at pbshawaii.org and on our YouTube page. In our town hall tonight, we have first-time voters from across the state, along with 2 political organizers who work to help register and educate voters. We are focusing tonight not on who these first-time voters are supporting, but rather why they're participating in the process and what issues are motivating them. So let's get to it. We want to start first with Misty Cruden. She's a 2023 graduate of Waiakea High School. She's a medical anthropology major at UH Hilo and the chairperson of the Hawaii State Youth Commission. So Misty, tell us, what are you looking forward to in participating in the election this year? What's got you excited to vote?
Definitely as I got older, learning more about politics and learning about how important my voice is in the world that we create, I definitely feel that voting is a way to make sure that my opinion gets out there and make sure that we elect the leaders that we want to see in our communities.
What are you hearing from your peers? Are you sensing that same kind of enthusiasm?
There's definitely some peers who still don't want to vote, but I try to surround myself with people who are motivated and confident enough to feel that their voice matters to also participate in voting.
We're going to turn to another person who probably is also excited to vote, and that is Aria Saenz, a 2023 graduate of Punahou School. She is now studying political science and history at Middlebury College, where she is also captain of the debate team. Do you share that same enthusiasm?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a college freshman last year, and while I'm studying, working a minimum wage job and then having to buy groceries, I think we're confronted with a lot of the problems that we face in Hawaii, where, you know, food prices are increasing and we have to also work a minimum wage job, and we want that to increase as well. And I think because we are confronted with a lot of these issues, we are even more invigorated to vote and make sure that those problems that we are facing are fixed.
And so why do you think, given that kind of passion that you have, that there is that disconnect between those numbers that I laid out and then the passion that I'm hearing from you?
I think what we have to do is, there's so much information that's going around right now. I mean, the internet is an amazing resource, but it also spews misinformation. And I think what we try to do, and I guess a lot of us are trying to do, is make sure that we get the right information to the right people so that they are confident in their leaders, instead of getting information from all sorts of places and not knowing what their politicians want and the policies that they're proposing. So I think that's one of the reasons why we as young people have to make sure that we have internet literacy and media literacy as well.
Interesting. Okay, let's hear now from Ku Kwanan, who is a 2023 graduate of Kekula o Navahi o Kalani o Pu'u Charter School on the Big Island. She also serves on the Hawaii State Youth Commission and is pursuing a degree in Hawaiian Studies at UH Hilo. Ku, what's driving your decision to be an active voter? Is it family that have voted in the past? Is it your friend group, or is it something that you're particularly passionate about?
One of my passions is definitely getting more youth to vote, because when we look at the time we're in now, and especially people who are my age, late teens, early 20s, we were kind of born in a really politically turbulent time. And I just would like to see more young voters voting, because it would just help kind of smooth our political climate right now, because it is really confusing to most young people, and also a lot of young people, and including my peers and family, just don't have trust and faith in the system anymore, and I just would like to see that change.
And what do you think would help to restore some of that trust?
Just more transparency with our government officials, especially in the state. And recently, Hawaii was voted one of the most politically corrupt states in the US. So obviously that's one thing that would kind of turn youth voters away, because they kind of think, what's the point if most of these people who are in office don't have our best interests at heart?
Okay, let's turn now to Judith Mills Wong, who is here tonight from the League of Women Voters of Hawaii, a nonpartisan organization that works to protect and expand voting rights. Judith, we heard some great reasons just from these three first speakers about why they're interested in the political process, why they want to vote. Why do you think there is that disconnect between those numbers that we laid out at the top, just 30% of youth in 2022 in Hawaii actually voting?
Well, I'm really delighted to meet these young people who are very interested and very willing and very excited to vote. But I think I remember when I was that age, and my biggest concerns were, how am I going to meet the rent? How am I going to make it to class on time? And I think a lot of young people don't prioritize this, thinking that they'll get around to it someday. And I think that's a shame, because all of the people you elect right now are going to affect you much more than they affect me. And I hope that changes.
Yeah, how do you make that pitch and really have it land? Because it does seem somewhat, far away. I've got so many things to deal with right on my plate right now. I'm going to college, or I'm starting a job, or I'm trying to get an apartment, all of those other things. Why, when you make that pitch, how do you make sure that it does resonate?
Well, I think it's a little easier here in Hawaii, because it is so easy to vote. Because just registering means that you're going to get the ballot. The information is available to you on the website for the elections office. Everything around you makes it possible for you to understand who these people are and whether they are in fact doing the things you want them to do. So I think it's easier here. But I think in other places, we really need to work at helping young people understand how important this is going to be to their future. And people like you are the people that we count on to do that.
I think we have some good advocates in this room.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's hear now from Giselle Rodriguez, a 2024 graduate of King Kekaulike High School on Maui. She is also a Hawaii State Youth Commissioner and just started at UH Manoa. Giselle, does what Judith just laid out ring true, that there are so many other things that are taking up a lot of time and energy for people your age, that maybe voting becomes sort of less important or goes lower down on the to-do list?
Yeah, definitely. I'm the second oldest of 7 children, so there's like a lot of responsibility, a lot of just focusing on school, focusing on family, because I come from a big family, focusing on like how we're gonna get food on the table or how long work hours are. So when we think of voting, it seems like a problem that can be pushed over towards tomorrow. But my thinking is more like, everything happening and all that stress we are receiving is because of the decisions of voting. in politics.
Yeah. So how do you think we can do better at drawing that line, right? Drawing the line between policy and the day-to-day struggles that you're describing?
One of my passions have been civic engagement, so just showing more youth that they do have a voice and that all the issues that they are dealing with affordable housing or just struggling with education, those can be fixed as long as you use your voice. So making sure that that's possible for youth.
Okay. Let's hear now from Dylan Catlett, who is a 2024 Waianae High School graduate, now studying computer science at UH Manoa. Dylan, what are your thoughts about why young people tend not to participate, why it falls down on the to-do list, so to speak, and to follow up, why do you want to vote this election cycle?
I think kind of touching on what everyone said, especially about family and everything, I think there are other priorities that tend to be kind of higher on the list, and voting might not be as popular, especially for the younger generation. But I do feel like, personally, I was voting due to my family. They always encouraged me to speak up about problems, not just in the state, but even just in small situations. So I think part of a big part of it comes from my family.
Mm-hmm. Does your family have a habit of voting? Is that why are politics part of the conversation in your household?
Yeah, so growing up, my parents always told me to kind of advocate, and then when I do become 18, to always vote. So kind of just from their mentorship, I feel like I've always had kind of the idea that I was going to be voting right when I hit 18.
That's interesting that family culture does play a role for sure. Let's hear now from Emi Sato, who is a 2024 graduate of Maui High School. She'll be heading to Cal Poly next month. You know, Emi, we want to be informed when we go to the ballot box, and we heard Aria talk about, you know, information and where all that's coming from. Where are you getting your information when it comes to figuring out who to vote for or what issues to be educated about?
I also have a lot of conversations with my family, as well as, of course, social media. I mean, you have to be very careful of what you perceive in social media, also having that media awareness. But I also find my news and who I'm gonna vote or what I'm gonna vote for through the news, the actual news, like the TV. I find that when those stories come up or when I get to hear it from those newscasters, it really helps, like, to talk with my family about, oh, what is this issue? For instance, the economy. I really kind of found that we're not in the most diverse economy in the United States right now. So trying to like find solutions and people to get to that solution is really been kind of where I want to find my information, and definitely voting in that election.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you said that you watch a traditional television newscast, because I think that is increasingly rare. Do you find when you are consuming media, on social media, that you're able to distinguish between what is a credible source and what isn't? Because that does seem like it could be pretty challenging.
It is very challenging sometimes, but going to multiple sources and kind of also, again, talking to my family really helps kind of find what is true and what is not true out of that.
You have to be kind of a detective on that.
Yeah.
Let's go to Logan Otani now, who graduated in 2023 from Roosevelt High School, now pursuing a degree in public health at UH Manoa. Logan, when people go into the ballot box, some folks are really motivated by a particular candidate, others are motivated by an issue. Where do you find yourself more leaning toward?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's really easy to follow based off the person. Obviously, I hear that a lot with my peers. They rather vote for someone based off of them instead of what their bills are actually. I'm using legislator as an example, and I think that it should be based off of what their purpose is and what they believe in. But it's really hard to find resources that are based off of that, and just trying to find, if, for example, I want to vote for someone and I feel really strong about children education. How can I find that if there's not much media covering that? That is a kind of tricky part, but I usually try to go based off of what their beliefs are and the actions.
Right, so more about the policy and less about the person. Especially when you look at presidential politics, you know, the issues are so vast. Do you find yourself being able to figure out what the platforms are, or are we really voting on personality?
That is a tricky one. I feel like it's definitely, I would have to say it's more personality based, and I think, you know, presidential election, there's so many layers to it, and it's really hard to pick at what is the truth behind these people. Not saying that anything's corrupt, but it is really hard to find like the truth of like what happens behind the scenes. So it is a little difficult, but I think there should be a little bit more of what happens at the policymaking sites.
Okay, we're going to go now to Kevin Davis, also a Roosevelt High School graduate, now studying business management at the University of East London in the United Kingdom. You know, we heard about different things that are motivating voters. What's motivating you? Is it an inspiring candidate, or are you more drawn to the issues?
I'm more drawn to the issues. I guess my issue that I'm like trying to specialize in is in climate change. It is such a big topic right now, and like if there's no ocean, there's no earth. And just trying to follow, like what Logan said about personality versus issue. I feel like it's very hard. My dad tells me all the time, a pair of lips can say anything, but it's all about their actions. So I kind of find it hard to choose between the issues or the personality.
Yeah,
and working on it.
Do you feel like the candidates, whether it's, you know, local lawmakers all the way up to the presidential campaign, are focused enough on the issue that you care about, or focused enough on climate change?
I feel like in the past, there has been a lot of growth, especially now, but I feel like we can do more. There's a lot of initiatives, because I study school in the UK. So in the UK and the EU, they are like the top leaders in climate change. And I feel like if we learn from other people and bring it back home, it'll be better.
It must be so interesting to view our election process. I mean, you get to participate,
right,
but also get to view it through a lens of being in another country. Right. Given that you have that kind of separation, tell me a little bit about how you're getting your information and how you think they're covering what's happening there.
Oh, I'm kind of like a little old school, so I get my news from like the newspaper. Also Instagram, social media, also talking to family and friends. Because the UK is so diverse and I'm studying business, everything that happens now we also discuss in classrooms, so talking to professors and stuff like that.
Okay, interesting. Let's go now to Melody Eli, who is graduated from Hawaiʻi High School in 2023, now studying education at Leeward Community College with plans to become a teacher. Melody, are you focused on a particular issue this election cycle? Are you focused on a particular candidate? Not necessarily needing to tell us who, but is there someone who's getting you excited to vote, or what's motivating you to participate?
I think that there's a broad different things of issues. I know for me, when it comes to voting or even just following along with what's going on with the news and the candidates, it's not only just the person, the personality. I really look at, like, what is their character? What do they stand for? What are their policies? You know, I find it very, very frustrating when a lot of these politicians are just talking, but they're not hitting those points. I'm like, okay, it's great that you're talking about this and that, but what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like not only that that the politicians are speaking to your issues, but that they're listening to the concerns of your generation in particular?
I'm not entirely sure. I do believe that at times that they do, because I have seen a political shift, and there's many women that vote for certain issues, and there's many men that vote for other issues, and I've seen that there's been a flip, or some going to the other side.
Okay, interesting. Let's hear now from Cameron Hurt, who is the project manager at Common Cause Hawaiʻi, a nonprofit that works to empower voters. We've heard from some very energized young people. They don't need the pitch, but clearly there are a lot of folks here in Hawaiʻi and beyond that do. When you're talking to young people and telling them why they should vote, what are you telling them?
I meet them with the truth. I don't try to sugarcoat it for them. and I speak to them in very plain language. And you can't discount the history here, right? Low voter turnout here is not by happenstance. It's quite literally by design. A kingdom was overthrown, a provisional government came in, and they made the people who were native to this island unable to vote. And then you see a Jim Crow-esque type style of laws perpetuated against the Kanaka Maoli population really until like the 70s, more recent time. So the state is already having to work backwards. This is not a Massachusetts where the state was founded and everybody came together and said, yes, we're going to believe in democracy and here's how. So when we say that we don't see why people trust the system, they were literally taught not to. They were taught that either you're never going to be able to vote, so don't vote. You don't own any land, so you're not going to be able to vote, or you're not intelligent enough to know what's going on to vote. And so a lot of that is now reversing. These guys here, which hats off to all of you and to your parents too, their parents are really probably some of the first generation to fully realize voting rights as, if they are of Native descent, as natives, and for sure their grandparents. So we're talking less than being 2 or 3 generations removed from this. And after that, because when you say that to young people, that resonates, they get it then. And then from there, you let them know what power they do have here. Like you said, they're about to count for 1/5 of the electorate. Their generation mixed with my generation is going to make the biggest voting block in this upcoming election.
But only if they actually participate.
Only if they actually participate, but showing them that, hey, real things can happen when you get involved. And I think the youth of Hawaii have been very involved in the election for this past year. And I think you can look at things like some amazing resolutions that were championed at the legislature this past year, which was led by the youth. I think there were some election results that came about, and even our local primaries, while they were to some uneventful, there were some changes and there were some hold-ons because of the youth vote. So showing them where they are participating and where to go from there. And I also think it's something that we need to address from the school system. These guys probably from the time they got to kindergarten until the time they left took math class, right? We all love math. We know that it's a function of how we're going to continue to grow as business, society, and all that. However, why are they not in every grade inundated with participation in democracy? Why is that not something that we feel like is worth making sure our students understand, hey, this is how you testify, hey, this is how a bill, we put on Schoolhouse Rock and say our job is done. And that is a failure of the older generations.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear from the students if you feel like the civic education that you got, because it is mandated by Hawaii state law, they are supposed to get some voter education. My understanding is at least that they are supposed to get that in public schools and beyond. Please,
I would like
yeah,
to
weigh
add
in.
to that. I do agree with that too. I think that is an issue. I don't think that they teach enough about the importance of democracy or voting in the schools. I know for me, growing up, you know, in 6th grade, they have us doing the practicing elections and polls. But as we grow older, you know, they're not really teaching us. They teach us about what the government is, the different branches. They teach us about the history, and that's nice, but we're in the present time. And so what are we going to do about it? They don't teach us about how to vote, where to vote. I know I worked at the DMV for a while, and every day I would see so many people, especially young adults, come in, and you know, when they look at the back of the application, they're like, oh, is this required? And I say, oh, it's optional if you want to vote. And I see so many people turn it down. And when I ask them, they're like, oh, no need. It's like, oh, no, I know, like, or they're like, oh, I'm not into politics, it's rigged. But, you know, a lot of them, they don't realize just how much impact they can have. And they don't also realize how easy it is. The election process, just checking it off, you know, just circling it in, you know. And, you know, I think that even just teaching them about the resources, finding the right resources on the media, because there's so much stuff. And I understand why people would be confused and afraid.
Yeah, Judith, I mean, are we doing enough to teach young people about not just history, but also current engagement and how to engage civically now?
Well, I would say probably we're not. But on the other hand, I know that if you talk to DOE or you talk to teachers, they'll tell you, we have a whole list of things we have to teach. We have to teach STEM. We have to teach reading. We have to teach this. We have to teach that. We have to teach financial literacy. and we also have to teach civics. So I do have a feeling for how difficult it is to get all of that in. But there's no question that as a nation, not just Hawaii and not just the current generation, we don't know very much about government. We pretty much take it for granted. We live here, it's probably going to be okay, somebody else will take care of it, they can vote. But that's not true. So I think it's incumbent not just on the teachers, but also on organizations like Cameron's and mine and many other very active organizations, and young people helping each other and older people helping each other learn about these things and educate themselves.
Aria, I saw you put your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think the problem is that we need to simplify talking about politics and being able to slip it into everyday conversations, even within school. So talking about politics can sometimes be scary, and I think a lot of people, a lot of students especially, get scared about talking about it in class because they don't know how to talk about it. But let's just say we have history, biology, financial literacy, all those topics includes politics. Like when we're talking about history and we talk about a women's right to vote, we can still talk about the wage gap. When we talk about the Civil Rights Act, we can talk about how Black people are still being mass incarcerated. Like there are ways to talk about politics in schools so that it's not only simplified but makes it a part of the curriculum so that it's less scary for people to talk about because it's just what we're learning and how our history was created.
Cameron, I see you want to weigh in.
Yeah, first, I say this as a former DOE teacher here, that while teachers do have a great lift on them, it is for administrators to look out for their teachers and to engage with community partners who want to come in for free and pick up this slack. And I speak that from my own experience with my organization. We've been to 7 schools ready to offer democracy program, but only 3 have taken us up at complete free to them.
And why do you think that is?
Because there isn't a feeling of importance or a buy-in from the youth, and I think that comes exactly from what was just said, that people don't know how to engage the youth on this. These guys are not disinterested by politics at all. They are very much interested in it, and you see it in the podcasts that young people are polled to be watching. These podcasts are not staying away from politics, but for some reason we keep telling ourselves that we have to. And maybe politics is the wrong word, but participation in democracy, civic engagement, that is a duty that should be just drilled into kids more than just their last 2 years of high school. When they're ready to get out, they're not doing anything, but I'm just trying to get through this course and get the collective and integrate it every way. I'm sure all you guys have had classroom norms, right? Classroom rules on the wall. Why aren't teachers drafting classroom constitutions? Why aren't we learning how to amend classroom rules? You know, why aren't there more honor councils? There's so much more we could actually do that we don't really try to. And I do want to push back a little bit or give context to this notion that it's very easy to vote here. And I think it appears that way. However, somebody like me, I literally did not get my mail-in ballot until the week before they were due. Imagine if I wasn't a political nerd, I would have given up and been like, okay, I guess my ballot's just not coming in.
Because it's not going to get there back on time.
Exactly. I'm also, for reasons I've worked with the city, I've had to be a registered voter. However, when I went for the primary, the party primary, I was told I wasn't registered to vote, which was absolutely impossible for my position. I would have had to have been. So I'm saying, me as a person, I've had now in the past 2 elections, 2 irregularities. I also think that it's disingenuous to say, like the grandmother in Waianae, right? She is, you know, the matriarch. She tends to her business in Waianae. She may leave. She doesn't have to leave often. There's 1 voter drop box in Waianae. Now, the rationale is there's 1 way in, 1 way out, so assumably everybody will go by there. What if you don't leave that area? What if you're not looking to leave Waianae? Then what are we doing to make that accessible? Or why is there only 1 polling place on an island the day of? That is absolutely, you've had kids talk about how their parents have engaged them in this. I remember going into the booth with my parents, pushing the button, getting the little sticker and going to McDonald's because we just did our thing.
Yeah, the sticker was definitely a lot of incentive.
It was a thing, but we don't have that here. And just because you have mail-in, that doesn't mean you get rid of for in-person, because it is exciting, it is thrilling. And recognizing that jobs can give people the day off on election day, that'd be another way to drive it. So to say that it's easy, I feel like it appears easy, but there is still way more that can be done to make it efficient.
I want to bring in a viewer question, and thank you for those of you who are calling in or sending us your question. Please continue to do so. This is from Henry in Makili. Appreciate the voice of young voters. Why don't they consider voting out older or senior legislators? They're doing the same old thing with no ideas or new voices. K牟, what are your thoughts about that? Should we be trying to mobilize, should youth be trying to mobilize more to elect people maybe who are more reflective of your own age demographic?
I think definitely, and that is something that I do look forward to in this upcoming election, is just, you know, fresh blood and new ideas, because some of these legislatures have been a part of our government for years now, and for years we have seen the same issues, and some of these issues getting worse over time. And the common denominator is, okay, who was in office this year, these 5 years, these 5 years, these 5 years, and look at the patterns. And that's why I think that we should be voting out, not with any hate, but voting out and voting in voting out older legislators and voting in younger ones.
Well, and the scenario that you're describing of the same person being elected again and again leads to less competitive races, which is a lot of what we saw in the primary earlier this month. And that goes to this question from Daniel, who says, does lack of competition tell people that voting is not important? Logan, what do you think about that? Like when we have races that maybe it's the same lawmaker that's been there for, you know, I don't know, 5 terms. And so then the challenger really is not, you know, doesn't have that kind of momentum. Does that mean that you're less inclined to participate because you kind of know who's going to win?
That is really tricky, you know, especially I think if the person is able, you know, they've been in office for X amount of years and they're doing something and it actually shows and people are responding to it well, then I don't think there's a problem with that. But it's when, like when I opened the ballot and I looked at my party and I looked at certain sections, there's only one name. And it's like, well, like how can I vote for you? Especially, you know, I'm gonna be honest, like some of the names I didn't even know. And if I don't know that person, it's like, how can I vote for you for this position if 1, you're the only person, and 2, there's like no one else to vote for and there's not much history about you. It's really tricky. And I think having fresh blood come in would make a change, especially because there's a stereotype that politicians are old also. And so having fresh blood can be nice, but if the politicians that have been in office for a long time can open their minds to the newer generation, I think that can be a lot more beneficial.
Yeah, Dylan, I saw you nodding over there. What are your thoughts about this, about perhaps trying to get younger people to engage in the process, not just as voters, but also perhaps as candidates? Would that energize youth a little bit more?
Yeah, I think I kind of related to you completely. Like when I opened up the ballot and saw my party, there's only like one name, and then I didn't really know anything about it. So I think like what she said really meant a lot. And then think about what more newer like legislators. I feel like that's more important because I feel like, especially in Hawaii, it's a really tight community. So like once someone gains a lot of momentum, especially like certain areas, like for the district votes, I feel like that can really help them to stay in office for a long time. So especially if you're trying to like start out new, I feel like it's really hard to gain momentum, like kind of what everyone was saying, and then trying to get that initial win.
Emmy, I'd love to get your thoughts about who you're discussing these issues with. I know you said that you're getting a lot of your information from traditional news media resources, but are you discussing these at home with your family? I know that Aria had said that it can be kind of scary sometimes, or you know, you have a little bit of nervousness about discussing this with your peers. Do you share that kind of feeling that maybe it can be a little risky to be politically open, if you will?
I'd say more recently, like the last 4 years, it's been a little bit more scary to discuss it with the peers my age, because like you don't want to step on anyone's toes or seem like what you're saying is invalid at all. So I feel a lot of trust in being honest with my parents and just discussing these topics with that idea in mind, but also like kind of taking what I see in the news, like, oh my gosh, this thing just happened, or what are we gonna do about it? What's the how of this lawmaker? why should I vote for them again? Like that's what I found myself thinking during the primary. I also did again see a lot of names that I didn't know, and I discussed that with my parents as well. And also my friends, we kind of came to an agreement on that. Certain floor is that we didn't really know a lot of these candidates that were on our ballot when we were trying to figure out who to vote for.
Yeah, Misty, what are your thoughts about this idea of discussing politics with your peers? You know, there is this sort of old saying that you should not discuss politics and religion in mixed company, but do you feel like you're able to talk about the issues with your friends, given especially how polarized the country is politically at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. When I was younger, I would try to refrain from discussing politics at all. First, I didn't know much about it. Second, I was scared that if I were to say something, other people wouldn't agree with me. However, as I got older, I found it more and more important to start using my voice for what I believe in, because if you stay silent and don't voice anything, other people are going to make decisions for you. And I think it's so important to make sure that if you have an opinion, you go out and share it. For example, when we circle back on the question regarding when there's only one candidate on the ballot, what do? You need to make sure that you're getting out there and letting that candidate know what you believe in so you can see the change in your community. If you just assume that that candidate is going to read your mind and know what is going to happen in the community, then you're mistaken. You have to make sure that you're being active, you're submitting testimony when it comes to bills, you're going to different marches, you're making sure that your voice is out there and that you're spreading your beliefs so that way they know what they should be fighting for and who they're fighting for.
Is there a particular issue that you find is most motivating to your demographic in particular? I think, you know, when we talk about the youth vote, traditionally, at least in this moment, a lot of people focus on what Kevin was saying about climate change. That's one. Reproductive rights would be another. Gun violence would be another. But is there something that you're particularly passionate about and doing research on right now?
For me, education is a big thing. I've noticed so much disparities between different high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools with the opportunity that students are given. I believe every student should have the same chance to be just as successful as their peers from another school, as well as civic engagement. For example, the Hawaiʻi State Youth Commission has been doing projects about voter registration to try to get youth to not only know what it is, but to actually fill out. So we went to a local high school and just did a little tabling event where we would have students come to us and ask questions. I feel that it all stems from education, and if we're not able to teach our youth about certain topics, they're never going to know what it is until they get older. So it's important that we spread these ideas and leave it in the back of their mind, like, yeah, voting is a thing. You should at least fill out a ballot, look at it, kind of get to know each other, and then I think that'll just be a great way to get youth involved as well as improve the education system.
Yeah, Giselle, what about you? We heard about education and climate. What are the issues that are motivating you this political cycle?
I would have to agree with Misty. Education is a big one for me. Being on Maui and being known as like an underrepresented community and coming from a school with students that don't feel like it's necessary to be heard. So focusing on education, focusing on how to make education better for students to be more civically engaged, to know what's happening, that's my biggest focus and my biggest passion right now.
You know, I'm interested in something that you said earlier about working at the DMV and having people say, oh, no need, I'm not interested, or it doesn't matter. Kevin, what are your thoughts about that? Do you feel like your vote counts, if you will?
I really do. But being in Hawaii, because I studied in the UK, I feel like there is a culture of a little culture of not wanting to talk about these political issues because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or you know, it can get very heated. But I feel like once we talk about these things, the connection between you two, like if you can open up your mind, it gets deeper. So we should talk about these issues and talk about these problems. And when you're talking about these problems to someone, they're not the problem. You know, you're just discussing an issue. You know, so people are entitled to their own opinion, I feel like.
Okay, I'd love to go around the room. Let's start with KޫKOU, and just if you could tell us briefly, let's go to each person because I'm just interested where you're getting your political information this cycle. KޫKOU, let's start with you.
So just like a lot of my peers, I do get most of my information from social media. So I do follow a few politicians on social media, and I also follow news accounts. I also look at news websites, so Hawaii News Now, Star Advertiser, Civil Beat is one I look at every morning. And yeah, those are the places that I get my information from this cycle.
Very well informed. We know that you're reading a newspaper, right, Kevin? Yeah, well, that's good. Old media needs support, so
Right,
that's great. And are you exclusively a print person, or do you go to other resources as well?
I do go to other resources, but it's just the feeling of having the paper, you know, drinking your tea in the morning and just looking at the newspaper.
I'm thinking of you in the UK with a cup of tea. You know, you've painted a picture, yeah. I like it. Okay, well, good. Enjoy the tea, enjoy the paper. I love that. Giselle, what about you? Where are you getting your information this cycle?
This past school year, it was more like social media and following like representatives. After my civics club at school, we ended up looking more at Civil Beat. So that's kind of been my #1 resource.
Yeah, and I asked this question just because the media landscape is so splintered, and if you think about where, well, most of us got news even 10, 20 years ago, and now it is so different. So, Misty, where are you getting your information from right now?
Like many of us, social media is a big thing, as well as watching the news, not only locally but globally. I think also having conversations with people is a great way to learn about different things, different beliefs and ideas. But I think a main thing as the young leaders that we are, we have to go out and do our research ourselves. We have to find what our passions are, and we have to search for candidates that align with that, as well as just asking around and seeing what other people believe in.
Okay, Amy, what about you? Where are you getting your information?
Hawaii News Now is a big one. I also follow a lot of politicians and news accounts on my phone, nationally, also globally and locally. I also watch like the 5-minute little videos on like Instagram to kind of like get myself ready for the day and kind of understand what's going on right now. And recently, to help me research for the election, the primary, I used a lot of Civil Beat.
Wow. I mean, Cameron, they're better informed, I think, than the average person. This perception that youth don't know or don't care, it strikes me, at least in this room, is not true.
I think you would find that by and large. I think that what you'll find when you ask that is that you'll find most kids actually do have these opinions, especially the kids that I'm going into schools and talking to, or the kids who are volunteering with my organization definitely do. And they may not be able to say it as this refined, but the passion is still there. And I think they're relearning an idea that you don't talk about politics. Well, let's rephrase that. People in a certain economic class don't talk politics. But there's a certain economic class where they talk politics any chance they get when they get with each other. And they're able to do it peacefully. I think people have kind of been scared into it. And I think maybe the past 8 years has been very scary. And for whatever reason here recently, it seems like it's getting a little less scary for them. Or these kids are fed up and they're overcoming their fear and they're saying, no, we're going to address it now.
Okay. Where are you getting your news this cycle?
Mostly social media, Hawaii News Now, but my major, we have a policy-making specialty, so we try to talk about big issues, like we have like a global health class and all that kind of stuff, so we try to talk about what's going on, like what's going on today, what's going on in the world today, what's happening disease-wise here. So just talking amongst like peers and like hearing like our teachers be like, oh, like when Maui had the fire, they brought it up and they're like, this is not part of our curriculum. But this is something we should be talking about, and I'm very fortunate that on opening day we go down and we actually get to talk with the legislature. I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna see all my favorite senators and like representatives, and I get there and I'm the only student there from my cohort. Everyone else is all professors. They're like staff members, and I'm like, why not? This is like your chance to meet them one-on-one. And I got to talk about I'm like, okay, I feel this way about mental health. I feel really big about mental health. I'm like, what is your opinion? Because I saw you supported this bill. And they're very nice. And they tell me, like, I think the root is from this. So I think people should just, like, get any chance to just go out and talk. That's the best way to do it.
Wow, Judith, I mean, that kind of engagement is like a dream, right? I think.
Absolutely. Bless you.
When you know, we've heard a variety of news sources, and we will finish out to hear the three that are left, but I'm interested in what you are advising young people as they go out, because the media landscape is so splintered, how you sort of, you know, everybody has limited time. So what are you telling them in terms of where to get information and how best to research an issue or a candidate?
Well, I think students and the public in general have so many sources of information that the really important thing is to be able to sort through misinformation, disinformation, and sources you can trust. So many of the students here have talked about sources you can trust: the printed media, the good sources of news like your own channel. Of course, there are, I have to put in a plug, League of Women Voters has Vote 411, and the Hawaii elections, so electionshawaii.gov, has sources for local candidates. And that is something that you all mentioned. It's hard to know all the local candidates. I mean, we all know who's running for president, even some of the weird ones that are running for president. But by that, I mean small candidates. Sorry, totally nonpartisan here. But we don't know who our councilman is, or we don't know who that person who is the state representative is. But that information is out there on Civil Beat, on 411, on your...
On pbshawaii.org, yeah.
Yes,
we've got a lot of
exactly.
candidate profiles, and you're right. And those smaller races, you know, the city council, for instance, has a huge impact on your day-to-day in a way that the president may or may not, right?
Exactly.
The trickle-down effect of that kind of policy is pretty far-reaching, whereas your city council person really has an impact.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, Dylan, what about you? Where are you getting your news from?
I feel like just like everyone, social media is a big part. But I would say in my high school years, through CRI Productions, our media team, I've actually got to work with like politicians themselves making news stories for different competitions. So I've made news stories with a couple of other people, but we've brought up topics like inflation or rising sea levels. And like through creating those news stories, I was actually able to get like a different point of view. For like the inflation, we got to interview one of the COOs of a local supermarket. So we got to see like on their end what struggles are they dealing with and how are they combating it so that they can keep affordable prices in the community while also trying to make money on their own. So like I feel like luckily through that program I was able to kind of get different perspectives on news and like what's their take on it.
Interesting. Melody, what about you? Where are you getting your information?
I'm similar to everyone else, so I do my own research. I don't let anybody think for me because I think that youth should be empowered to really research and see for yourself, find out for yourself. I look at different news outlets, social media, news articles, and the thing is I don't just look at one side. I look at different sides because I want to know both sides of the story, what one candidate is doing, what another candidate is doing. I don't want to be biased. I want to be open-minded and see what they're doing. You know, I talk to friends and family. I talk to a lot of people. I talk to classmates, peers, all kinds of people because I think that it's really important for us as Gen Z to come back to the place of being okay with other people having different opinions than you. That's why it's so scary because sometimes it feels like we're walking on eggshells and we don't want to offend anybody, but we also want to have those important conversations, to speak the truth, to speak the facts, and really just be open-minded and have those kind of sit-downs.
Aria, how about you? Where are you getting your information this election cycle?
Yeah, as a debater of 5 years, I think my coach told me to always critique every single article that I see. I think about like, who wrote this? Why did they write this? Do they have any bias towards this? And when you look at a lot of news sites, you start seeing the patterns, right? Like if I were to look at the Heritage Foundation and I get an article from them, I know that they're probably going to be anti-China. I have a list of things that I know that they are known to do. And so keeping that bias in mind, I'm going to read that article with that bias in mind. So if you look at Bloomberg, Reuters, World Economic Forum, you need to always keep in mind the type of articles that they've released in the past and how that informs how you perceive that article. And on that topic, I think we talked about like council members and, you know, how people don't know who their council members are, or like people don't know the information that's out there. And I think working for a council member this summer, Council Member Tyler Dos Santos Tam, like these people are in these offices, like getting phone calls from people in the community, and they truly do want to help you. And so I think what's important to know is that you should look up your district council members, you should look up who represents you, and once you know who that is, give them a call. Like, it's that simple at times. You just have to know who represents you. You type in the phone number and say, hey, this is an issue that I have. And if you voice your concern, and if maybe you encourage other people in your community to voice the same concern, then that becomes a priority to them. Then they can't go without hearing you. And I think that's important to remember for youth and also older people in the community as well.
Yeah, there's a caller who wrote in and says, are you guys an anomaly, or are a lot of your peers this passionate about caring about what goes on in government and how it affects you? What do you think? I mean, you do seem like an exceptional bunch, I have to say. And you were chosen to participate for a reason, right? We wanted folks who were engaged in politics and at least wanted to vote, not necessarily knowing who they're going to vote for, but that they did want to participate. But all right, do you think that you guys are exceptional, or do you think that a lot of young people feel the same way?
I think a lot of young people feel the same way, and that's because politics and voting in elections has become less about being political and more about morals. It's become more about principles. I mean, I think as people that grew up in Hawaii, we hold a few values that I think are pretty unique. For example, we grew up learning about how to take care of the Aina. We have a responsibility to the earth, just like how it takes care of us. And that's why we care so much about things like climate change. And we're also on an island, so we are susceptible to the consequences of climate change more than other places. You know, we live on eroding coastlines. We live in a time where we have hurricanes that affect our infrastructure, and that's a problem we face every day. So then when we look at presidential candidates who say things like climate change is a hoax, or we shouldn't allocate money to these places where we have to carry the burden of climate change, that becomes a problem for us because it's how we live. So it has become less about politics and more about morals. And I think as someone that's biracial, half Japanese, half Ashkenazi Jewish, when I see a leader who also is kind of like me, who's also biracial, I am more likely to vote for them because I know that they share the same vision of America as I do. Whereas on the other hand, if you have presidential candidates being like, is she really Indian? Is she really black? Not understanding the basic concepts of multiculturalism, where in Hawaii, a lot of us are Asian. A lot of us have family members and ancestors who speak a different language, who came from different places. We value multiculturalism. And to have people and politicians in power that don't have that understanding, it's really frightening.
Interesting. I mean, can we get a wide shot of the whole of all these students? I'm wondering how many of you are still undecided, or have you all made up your mind? Let's just talk about the presidential, and you don't have to tell us who you're voting for, but how many of you are still undecided or have none? Okay. Wow, that's interesting. So in the lead up now to the election, will you turn, since you've made that decision, do you turn that then into activism? Will you be advocating for someone, KޫKOU?
Me personally, I'm also on the same page as everybody else, as in not having a bias and not letting other people decide and think for me when it comes to politics. So I like to follow my own rule, and I don't really say who I'm really voting for to others, but I do say what policies I support. But I don't want my peers to vote for someone just because I said so, and because I'm the political one, I should know better, because I don't know what's good or right for each community. You know, I don't know what Maui needs. I don't know what Oahu needs because I'm not from these places. So I really don't like to push my own biases onto other people.
You know, it's interesting, Cameron, because there's a mix. Like, Logan's very politically engaged, going to the legislature on opening day. And then we have Arya saying, you know, I think that a lot of young people are engaged. You're saying that a lot of young people are engaged. But at the same time, the numbers don't show us that. So what's the disconnect?
It's an access issue. It goes back to education that I think several people in this panel have. It's, again, not that kids don't care. but it's connecting it so that they understand or telling them where their next step is.
Right.
It's not that they won't participate, it's that they feel disenfranchised too. So when I go to them and it's like, hey, you guys aren't voting, it's not like, yeah, who cares about that? It's like, well, yeah, of course we're not voting because it seems like the same thing happens every time. They have a reason. And having a reason is sometimes it can be what I think sometimes the older generations misconstrued as laziness. Sometimes it's an act of protest, and sometimes it's an act of sheer ignorance. I don't know. But as soon as they do know, that's what's important. Pay attention with what somebody does when they get the information. And I see young people acting on it. And I think it's very powerful that you can see it in the recent numbers of, you don't need to look at polls. Polls are just a snapshot. But look at voter registration. Look at how much it's up right now with young people. And I think that shows that they are absolutely interested. And I think, again, these guys are, yes, they were picked to be here, absolutely. But they weren't hard to find. They were not hard to find. If we needed to, there could have been 30 kids in here today. I'm sorry, not to call you guys kids. They
are a voting age.
30 young adults here today. And I think, again, that speaks to them wanting to. It's not that they don't care. It's an access. It is, I'm working on election day and I don't ever check my mail anyways because I live at home with my parents so they can check it. I'm working on election day. Nobody's making, there's only one place on Oahu that you can go vote, or two, I'm sorry. So if I'm in Haleiwa, where am I going to go? If I'm in Kailua and I've only got a 30-minute break on lunch, where am I going to go to vote in person? You know what I'm saying? So again, we get drunk on this idea that it's so easy to vote here without realizing that, again, there are a lot of systemic issues that we're not undoing to give that access to understand how it's easy to vote.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Misty? Do you feel like we're not giving young people the tools to participate, or this, perhaps it is sort of this feeling that Cameron alluded to where you feel like, why should I vote? The same people are on the ballot. I mean, a number of you mentioned that you saw names that you didn't necessarily recognize, or perhaps just one name. What are your thoughts on that sort of disconnect?
Definitely it would be education and opportunities that students have. For example, when I was just starting out in high school, I told myself I wouldn't become engaged in politics. Politics aren't important to me, but as I got older and I joined student council, I got these opportunities to go to the legislature, to hear from people, to learn about different bills. That's when I really found myself politically active. Like, just learning about things that are happening in our community is something that really led me to want to vote. And I think not every student has that opportunity to be able to go out. They don't have those resources provided to them in the educational level. So giving that opportunity in the classrooms by telling people what voting is, what will come out of voting, as well as saying how they can get engaged locally. So like their council members as well as their state legislators is a really important way to start getting your voice out there, to really learn what politics means to you.
Yeah, Giselle.
I also just wanted to add on to what both Cameron and Misty said. It is about access, and it's easy to help and give the students access if adults are agreeing, if people from the county or legislation, if they're coming in and they're also making the effort to teach youth, that itself would make a huge difference. I know for my school, I had to contact county council members and I brought them in to talk story. And youth seeing that, yeah, this person has a high position, but they're listening to you, that's making a huge difference. And I just feel like that needs to happen more, and especially in public schools where, you know, economically, it's not so great. So just giving students that power and that voice.
Yeah, and part of that voice too is the candidates listening to the issues that you are most passionate about. Emmy, what are your thoughts about that? What do you want, like Eric in Kailua is asking, what do you, the young people on the panel, want candidates to hear from the young people, and do they listen?
I think they do listen when we speak out. But personally, I want to hear less of the issues that we have. We know we have issues. We know we have economic issues, housing issues, education issues. But really, it's about the how. It's not so much the what, the why. Well, of course we know the why, but how are we going to get from point A to point B to make point A better? because really, I've been to the legislator at conferences, and I see these people working, but more so at the beginning, right before we're supposed to vote. Like, how are they gonna? What's their plan? What's their plan to like get us to the point where we can imagine a better future for housing, a better future for our economy, more diversified? I really just want to know how.
Yeah, you want specifics, which is, I think, a thing a lot of voters share. Kevin, what are your thoughts? I know you said that your issue is climate change.
Yeah.
Do you feel like candidates, what do you want candidates to hear from you on that issue?
No, everybody, yeah, thank you for listening to all your points and stuff. I do agree with everybody. I want to add on to the last question about the challenges, the disconnect. I think there's a lot of like political jargon that is not easily comprehensible. We should put it in plain English, just like what Cameron said, and I'm very happy that your organization does that. But yeah, all this political jargon, it should be in simple English for people to understand. So I think that is a disconnect too.
Yeah, increasing access. You know, Melody, you shared that really interesting anecdote about working at the DMV. Do you have similar conversations with your peers who, may not be as politically motivated as you and may say, why bother, it doesn't matter, and how do you respond to that?
Yes, I do. So actually, knowing that we were coming here, and even prior to that, I was already talking to people, but especially knowing that we were coming here for this discussion, I was asking around. I was asking my friends, other young adults, other people. I'm like, hey, like, what do you think about voting? Like, why do you not vote? Why do you think that a lot of young adults and youth don't want to vote? And, we'll have that kind of dialogue. And, that's actually when I said that, that's actually where some of those answers came from. And so when I talk to them about it, what I tell people is that when you're voting, usually when something happens, people just automatically blame the president. And yes, the president is in charge of federal things and over certain things, but I don't think that people understand that there's also a state level. So I'm like, yes, the people that we elect, the legislative, representative, senators, they're the ones that we elect that make the law bills that affect us. So, and when I put it into that perspective for them, there's actually some people that were just like, oh, like you're right about that. I should vote.
Yeah, interesting. Dylan, what do you say to Eric and Kailua? What do you, the young people on the panel, want candidates to hear from you?
Well, yeah, I think just the common issues that we all agree on should be kind of more voiced, like climate change, inflation, like stuff like that should kind of be more prioritized in candidates if they want our vote. I feel like that plays a big part on our sway of whether we vote for them or we not vote for them. And yeah, I just think just like common things that everyone in our generation would agree on would really impact how much votes they get from our generation.
Mm-hmm. And Logan, you talked about going to the legislature and how that was very satisfying to actually get to meet these lawmakers and have your voice heard. When you do you encounter conversations similar to what Melody was describing, where people think that, voting doesn't really matter?
Not at the legislature. I mean, obviously on opening day.
Yeah, not there.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be the place, but I mean more generally in your peer group or beyond, people who might not participate in the political process, and what do you tell them about it?
Yeah, definitely. Being able to actually see it and like feel it, it's crazy because you're like, oh my gosh, like I can make a difference. Like I am doing this and it's being heard by the big shots, It's so satisfying. But, I talk to my friends who are like not into student council, not into politics. And a lot of times it's more of just, we don't want to stir the pot. That's the big reason why people don't want, at least from what I can like see around, is people don't want to stir the pot. And that's why they don't want to get into politics. I mean, I'm the same way. Like, I don't really want to talk to certain people, because I feel like it would just create drama and I just don't really want that. But it's just, I feel like just they don't want to cause drama. And you feel like it's taboo to talk about politics, especially talking from your side. So not necessarily boring or like I don't want to vote, but it's more of I don't want to vote because I feel like my opinion is not valid.
Aria, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on top of that, I find that a lot of my peers, it's not that they don't want to vote because they don't think their voices are heard. It's a lot of times they don't want to vote because they don't think they're the perfect candidate or a person is the perfect candidate, and that's why they're undecided. They're like, this candidate doesn't check all my boxes, so why should I vote? And to that, I say we vote for progress and not for perfection. Yes. And I think that needs to be stressed, especially right now. I think, you know, because we live in like a blue state and maybe we have certain protections that our state and local governments give us, not everyone has that privilege. There are women who still live in red states who don't have reproductive rights. There are, you know, people of color in Texas, Iowa, queer people in Mississippi. We're voting for them too. So I think when we think about who we want to vote for, especially in the presidential election, we need to think about the candidate that will give us the most amount of benefits, not the person that is exactly like us and will check all the boxes. Because in reality, unless you're voting or unless you're running yourself, you're probably not going to agree with every single thing a candidate is going to say.
Yeah. You don't need to fall in love with your candidate.
Right. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right?
We have to make sure that our electorate understands this. We've become adapted, probably since JFK Jr., to kind of falling in love with these candidates. But just because a candidate in his time is likable does not mean everyone else. We are not falling in love with these people. It is not a love affair. I don't like you. You are here to do a job for me, and I'm holding you to account.
Right. I agree with that. I definitely think that it's not a Valentine just because you vote for a certain candidate. It doesn't mean that you absolutely love everything about them, you absolutely love everything they do and their policies, but no, maybe like some of the things or a lot of the things that they stand for lines up with your beliefs. So if that's what you stand for, then go for it. It doesn't mean that you're a terrible person for picking that person. You're standing on what you believe in.
Yeah. Misty, I'm interested to know if you think, you know, if you have political discussions and debates, just going to what Logan was saying about, you know, Hawaii, we are a kind of place where we don't want to offend anybody, you know, that is part of our culture as well, that we want a lot of harmony, but that can lead to maybe not voicing an opinion in as strong a way. Politics is pretty opinionated, so how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's really difficult because some of your closest either family members or friends might have different opinions from you and you don't want to offend them. However, it is important to have these conversations with people, not necessarily in an attempt to debate against them, but just to kind of understand why they believe that and just respecting each other. So I think just the best way to approach that conversation is to think of a topic, for example, like, oh, there's 2 hurricanes coming right now. What do you think is causing that? Some people might have a certain opinion and some people might not, but just approaching that and knowing that you want to be active and get other people's opinions shows that you're already becoming politically engaged because you have the opportunity and you have the patience to listen to other people. You're able to respect other people at the same level that you would want to be respected at.
Yeah, Judith, please.
Several times we've brought up the idea of talking politics, and that can be very touchy, and I agree. And certainly I encourage people to talk politics with anyone and everyone, to both talk it and listen it. I think that's really important. But I want to point out that talking politics is not the same as talking voting. If you can talk voting, you can encourage people to register, especially young people who've never registered before. You can encourage people to register and vote without saying a word about politics. And I hope that all of you are encouraging other people to register and vote, not just the people who are excited like you are, and intelligent like you are, and really going like you are, but the people who aren't, the people who don't think about that as much. Because the first thing you have to do to vote is to register.
Yeah, and K牟, what do you think about that, about trying to at least encourage other folks to vote? Maybe not necessarily with your same political leaning, but just encouraging folks to participate in the process. Do you think that that might be an easier conversation to have?
Yes, and I do have that conversation a lot with my peers, especially at the university and the College of Hawaiian Language, and mostly, especially among my Native Hawaiian peers, because what I notice amongst my peers is that almost all of my Native Hawaiian peers don't want to vote, and that has a lot to do with what Cameron has already said about just not having faith in the system, because we were all brought up this way. And it's just really hard to trust the system now. But I try to encourage my friends to vote is that you don't want other people to vote for what's right for you. You don't want to vote for other people who think they know what's best for you, but they don't. Why are you letting other people vote for what you need and your community needs?
Yeah.
You know, so it's just looking at your community issues and saying, what does my community need right now? And another thing I would like to mention, and this is kind of piggybacking on the education conversation, is that a lot of my peers can't really connect to anybody who is running. And this also boils down to the issue that we talked about when you open the letter for your party and you only see one name on the ballot. One thing that I was thinking about throughout all of these conversations is that, yes, in high school, we're taught how to vote, how to register, and how to send in testimony. But one thing that at least I wasn't taught in my high school was how to run for mayor, how to run for these boards,
Amen.
and how to run for governor, and just all of these things that could be done in order to kind of get people more excited and more connected to the people who are running.
Yeah, I'm interested to know if any of you have any interested in not only just being a voter, but also being a candidate, you know, starting at the neighborhood board level or, you know, with something, you know, eventually getting to governor and beyond. But I'm interested, do any of you have that inclination? I think Kevin is, you know, from his tea across the pond with the newspaper. But yeah, please elaborate.
Yeah, through CTL, Center for Tomorrow's Leaders, one of our homework assignments was to research our community board. And I remember, because I live in Hawaiʻi, and I remember looking at the board and the board meetings, and they were talking about like a water leak. I'm like, I don't even hear about this stuff. You know, I'm in school, I'm always working. And yeah, I've been interested in getting in the community board, maybe doing politician work, but we shall see.
Yeah, and Cameron, what kind of a difference can it make? You know, you look at the demographics of the neighborhood boards, and I know the city has done outreach in the past to try to encourage younger folks to run for neighborhood boards, and not even folks as young as this, just people who are still of working age, because we do find that, you know, it does tend to skew to people who have a little bit more time, and they often tend to be retired, so that the issues that get addressed don't necessarily reflect all the issues in the community. What kind of a difference can it make when a young person is on a neighborhood board?
I'm only here because I started on a neighborhood board. So that helped to give me access, know-how that would ultimately land me in the position that I am today. Our neighborhood boards are a true gem, and just to be funny, we'll say a Lego piece, if you will. And it really is one of the starting blocks. And if you're a young person, it's one of the ways that you can really get in directly and start serving specifically your local area. And as these guys already pointed out, that's really where the rubber meets the road, is these local elections. So the neighborhood boards offer an amazing opportunity. I think commissions, both at the city level and the state level, with the right type of mayor and governor or whoever is sitting in that executive branch being imaginative enough and innovative enough to engage young people, it's a great opportunity, And I just want to say this, being here tonight, I'm really realizing the understanding. The kids are all right.
I want to get to this question from Chase, who's relocated to Las Vegas and is streaming the program. Thank you so much, Chase, to watching this news from home. Says that when voting, do you stick to one political party up and down the ballot, or do you decide on a case-by-case basis? Emmy, let's go to you on that. Do you tend to vote single party all the way down, or do you look at individual candidates depending on the race?
I do look at it as a single party. However, it's always good to research, and I realized throughout the last 8 years especially, I've been researching both sides, but I've kind of stuck down to one party.
Yeah.
Can I just say really quick, I'm so sorry, because that question in general is hard for if you're a first-time voter, because you don't get the chance. Yeah. Until November to try to cross over. So
right. So I guess you'll have that opportunity in November, but you haven't thus far. I want to share some really nice comments here. I love this program. I appreciate this. Is Susanna from Alewa Heights. I appreciate what is being presented. My wish is that elected officials will see this and create policies and programs that will help to get the youth more engaged. Yes. Dylan, what are your thoughts about how we can better engage young people? You know, kind of going back to where we started about what's motivating all of you to vote. We heard a lot of different different reasons, and how we can bring that out in your peers so that that 30% number is a lot higher come November.
Yeah, I think the best way is to kind of engage people is to kind of post on the platforms that we look on the most. So I think reaching out on social media, kind of putting out like what your policies are, what you support, what you don't support, and kind of the overall like morals you support, really give like us a really good idea of who you are without even meeting you. I think social media is probably one of the best ways to probably connect people with more of our generation.
Yeah, meet them where they are, right? This one is from Jim in Kailua. Says, what a wonderful program this evening. Thanks, Jim. Very proud to see so many of our young citizens expressing an interest in our electoral system and passionately researching and engaging on the issues they value. Some of my faith and hope in our democracy has been restored. Aria, you know, there is this perception that young people either are, as Cameron said, perceived as being lazy or not engaged or not educated on these issues, but clearly that's not the case.
And I think in some part we have politicians to thank for that as well. And the reason why is because the internet has become so accessible and social media has become so accessible. So when politicians post on Instagram or TikTok, we are able to see the issues that they care for, and we are finally educated on some basic level. And then from that point, we can research ourselves. And so I think that's why it's also important, if you do get a lot of your information from social media, follow candidates, follow your local representatives and senators, see what they're talking about. And a lot of the times they do post about events that they're having, like, hey, we're having a Kalihi neighborhood walk, or we're having a Chinatown get together, working with Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos Tam. I got to see a lot of this where he invites people in the community to come. And I think if we keep checking up on those social media sites of politicians and community events, then slowly we get a lot more involved than we thought. And it's also an easy way because you don't really have to have an opinion. You just show up to an event, see what they have to say, meet other people who may have the same views, and suddenly you're a lot more engaged than you were before.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of direct impact is really interesting. And Logan, it's what you were describing in going to the state capitol. I think some people, regardless of age, could feel intimidated by engaging in that way. What would you tell them about that experience?
It's really not scary. I mean, it doesn't have to be like you go up to their office, you're like, hey, like I want to talk. You don't have to talk to them directly. It is as simple and actually I shouldn't say so. It's as easy as doing a testimony. You don't have to, be there in person. You can either do a Zoom meeting, you can either write an email, but you're really showing that you're putting yourself out there and you're feeling like, I support this and I think you should hear it. And I feel I've sat in a couple of testimonies. I listened. Some of my peers did testimonies as well. And you can feel the passion that these people have. And I believe that the legislators or the people in office do respond pretty well to it. Like, they're not just going to be like, oh, it's a testimony. We're just doing our job. It's like, okay, you feel strong about it. I'm going to listen. And it gives people time to actually talk about it. I think that's just the most important thing, is just hearing people who are passionate talk about it, because everything is just going to be flowing out.
Yeah, and Judith, for those folks who are watching, who are so encouraged by this, what would you advise to them about how to approach the young people in their lives on how they can start to engage on these topics? Not necessarily talking about the issues, but talking about what you were saying. There's talking about politics, and then there's talking about voting. If there's someone watching tonight who says, you know what, my niece or nephew or, a young coworker, how do you broach that
first
subject?
thing I would say is record this show and show it.
We've done it all for you.
Have them meet all of these young people who are so excited and so exciting. But also just talk about how important it is. I mean, many of us of my generation, and that's a very old generation, just forget that you don't start out practicing to vote. You don't start out thinking about how to decide which candidate works, which candidate doesn't. You gather that through the process of learning and helping young people see how important it is to you to vote, and helping them connect to the idea of there are places they can get information, like the ones you just listed. There are ways to think about candidates and ways to think about what they want to happen in the future, and they can make a difference. And in fact, as Cameron says, they probably will make the difference this cycle.
Yeah, Giselle, are you feeling empowered? Do you feel like your vote is going to make a difference, like what Judith is talking about?
I do, and I know that I am voting for myself, but I'm also voting for my community and my family and my little siblings. So
yeah, that's
I'm
a
excited.
lot of responsibility too, right? Yeah. And when you think about voting on their behalf, you know, how does that impact how you see the issues?
It really makes me look at issues more closely and making sure that the candidates are like marking off what I want, or actually looking at these issues in the first place, or trying to come up with a solution. So
yeah, I mean, Judith's right. We laid it out at the top, a fifth of the electorate. It could be the deciding factor in a close election. Amia, do you feel like you have a lot of political power, and that your that your age group has a lot of political power that might be underutilized?
Yes, if we use it, if we use that power, I feel like educating ourselves with the issues that were going on. I mean, I live in Maui. Of course, we have the fires, and all of the reaction to that. I feel like if my peers, especially like who were affected by those events, see this happening, then, well, they have the power to rebuild it all. They have the power to change history, change the place that they live in for the better.
K牟, what about that? Because you brought up this idea that there might be some resistance because of, you know, the history that Cameron laid out. How do we shift that so that there is a feeling of empowerment around engaging in politics?
Well, like I already said, it is about education and just getting more young people into the legislature, and definitely more Native Hawaiians as well, because a lot of Native Hawaiians do look at our legislature and don't see themselves really represented, which is a bigger issue in itself. And I just think that, yeah, we could be doing more within our education system.
And Misty, when you are, you know, going out and perhaps making the pitch to your peers to get involved, what will you tell them about why they should vote?
I would probably tell them that if they don't vote, someone else is going to make a decision for them. And none of us, I'm sure, none of us like to have someone speak for us. So if we're not saying what we believe in, someone is going to assume what they think is the best for us, and they're going to go ahead and spread that idea. So it's all a matter of making sure that you're confident enough in your own opinion to be able to express yourself, to show that I'm here, this is what I believe in, and I want to see this change happen.
Yeah, Cameron, there's a comment here, says lack of community engagement is the leading issue for lack of education related to politics, it seems. Do you think that the politicians themselves recognize the power of this demographic? You know, when we laid out just that statistic at the top, that twice as many people over the age of 65 vote compared to the people in the 18 to 24-year-old age group. Clearly, you know, you're going to talk about one issue that is very important, let's say Social Security and Medicare, because it affects twice as many people who are going to get out and vote for you. Do politicians, you think, realize the power of this group, especially in this cycle?
I think they do. I think first to your first point about, you know, how they kind of, their priority list and they're going towards their electorate's age. But I would almost reframe it that maybe they're going towards their own demographic. I mean, these guys have said time and time again they want to see themselves reflected in the legislature. They're not just talking about ethnicity. They're not just talking about gender. They are very much talking about where these people are at in their lives. But I think, let me take that back. I know the legislators know the power that these guys have in their demographic, I mean their generation, because when they do show up in large amounts to testify, I promise you there are many meetings afterwards about, wait, we've got a lot of young kids paying attention to this. What's going on? What's the messaging? Why is it happening this way? What can we do? Can we get some of them in here now to talk to them one-on-one to take the message back? So they are very much, all ears are up when the youth show up in numbers, whether it be to vote, whether it be to testify, whether it be for a potential con-am. Like we have a constitutional amendment coming up for marriage equality, you know, which again, that is the one of the driving forces of millennials and Gen Z. So I think they absolutely understand how powerful this voting bloc is.
There's someone who wrote here, all those kids need to work together to make a change. And I think that you've started by having this conversation in the first place. You know, Kevin, what would you say to folks who are on the fence about voting? We started out at the top talking about the lack of youth participation. What's your pitch as to why people should take part of the process, given all the, you know, barriers that we've talked about tonight?
I would like to piggyback off of what you said. We don't like when people make decisions for us, and we want to put our voice out there. So get your voice out there, go out and talk to both sides, not just one party, both sides, and try to engage with the community and, you know, be open-minded. So that would be my pitch.
Aria, yeah.
Yeah, to those people who are hesitant about voting, I would say when we vote together, we have collective bargaining power. And collective bargaining power is what's going to make these politicians listen to us and finally implement the policies that we want them to. So just know that if we stick together and we vote together, then we are more likely to see ourselves and our values reflected in our system.
Yeah, Logan, let's get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like, we are the future generation of Hawaiʻi, you know? We are the generation that just, you know, graduated high school, going on to college. We are the young adults that have the power to drive, like, what we want to see change. So why aren't we doing something about it? If we want change, we should be able to do it. And I think that, well, I know that anybody has the capability of doing so. I think it's just learning how to take that first step, because I think just taking that first step, especially here in Hawaiʻi, you're definitely going to be able to see it.
Yeah, Melody, what are you thinking about tonight?
Yes, I was going to agree with that. Again, voting is not a Valentine. It's really voting for your future and the kind of nation that you want to live in. You know, we see the inflation, we see these things in the education system. What kind of world do you want to live in? And it's not only for your future, it's for the future of your friends, your family, even your future kids. So really just think about that.
Yeah, it's hard to picture, you know, when you're going that far out. But Giselle, you referenced that too, that you're thinking about, you know, your siblings and those who are coming up behind you. Dylan, what are your thoughts? What's your pitch to folks as to why they should participate, particularly of this age group?
I think people our age don't know how much this affects them. I think if they know, like, how much this affects them in the long run, especially if they're going to be living here for their entire life, they would be more concerned about the policies and, like, all the rules and all the bills that are going into play that's going to actually affect them in the future. Because right now they might just thinking about, like, well, how can I survive, like, right now, but they're not thinking in the future. So I think maybe looking back and kind of taking a breath and thinking about, like, what's going to happen to me 20, 30 years in the future will actually kind of start a conversation about actually voting.
Okay, so Cameron, we've got about 30 seconds left for young people who are not registered to vote, who haven't gone through this process. What are the resources for them to actually get involved?
One, you can go, well, I don't know which camera I need to be at, but you can go to Common Cause and we will get you squared away. If you want to do it yourself, you can go to the state government website and you can register to vote. You can also go into Honolulu Hall or to any city hall if you are on a neighboring island and get registered to vote. Once you are registered to vote, you will automatically get your ballot, and you will get also a list of places where you can vote in person.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Mahalo to all of our guests and to all of you at home for being part of tonight's town hall. We will be back with another KΑKOU in October talking about aloha. Aloha is what makes Hawaii, Hawaii. But in our ever-changing world, has the aloha spirit changed? How do we keep it and help it flourish? Be sure to join us for State of Aloha. Until then, I'm Yunji Denise. Good night. Ahui ho.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.